There's two things about the social movement theory that we use, and then also that I want to say. One is that after exploring the different movements as theories, we actually wind up talking a lot about what's called framing. And what framing theory is about how to change the debate, right? And one of the things that's absolutely critical is that these groups have changed the debate to one about interlinked destinies. They've changed the debate in ways that we think about. So hardly ever think about, I think. So for example, the living wage movement. What a great way to frame a debate, because to be against it, you have to be against a living wage, right? That's pretty unsustainable, right? When you start thinking about a new movement that's emerging, this movement not around immigration policy, but around immigrant integration, because from where I come from, example, in Los Angeles, 1/3 of our residents are immigrants, half of our workforce is foreign-born, 2/3 of our children are the children of immigrants, 90% of them are U.S.-born. They're not going anywhere. How they do and how their parents do determines the future of the region. So when we shift the debate to immigrant integration, how can you be against immigrants and integration? Those are two great American values. Part of what these movements have done is reframe the debate, and the way in which they've done it is by creating a series of think and do tanks around the country that are trying to figure out what is the language, what is the frame, what are the set of issues that directly apply to that region, what's a new way to speak that actually begins to move people along. And that's why it's so exciting what you're doing here at the Springfield Institute. The second thing, and it's actually one of the places that we closed the book in the last chapter, is to try to disappear this gap between the university and the community. And part of that has to be the university recognizing the intellect that's there in the community. We actually closed the last chapter of the book, and then we closed the book. I'll talk about how we closed the book, by talking about a meeting we were in December 2006 in Los Angeles, in which a series of organizers from around the country, from Virginia and Boston and New York, and from a group called the Miami Workers Center and a group called Strategic Alliances for a Just Economy in Los Angeles, all came together in Los Angeles for a 2-day meeting to talk about the work of a French philosopher, Henri Lefebvre, who has a thing called Right to the City, because they were all anti-gentrification efforts, and they thought, I wonder if we could adopt a frame that we could all use together and talk about right to the city, and that way the work we're doing across the country would amplify so it's all part of the same movement. And they've now created something called the Right to the City Network. Now, we as academics like to think we're bringing theory to community, right? But when you see community sitting there going, I wonder if I can use this French philosopher guy to reframe my work to be able to link the movement, right? You know the academy's behind it. And you know there's something that's really exciting, something big going on there in terms of the way that people are thinking and moving and really shaping a new debate. Let me tell you how the book closes, which, by the way, shouldn't stop you from buying the book, because you know the end. Because actually the end came because I was talking about this book in December 2007 at Cornell University. And I was actually talking to a very skeptical set of people who were professors, and they were saying, you're very optimistic about these regional equity movements. And I kept saying, part of what's going wrong with you guys is you look at the fact that Bush won that second time, and what you're not really realizing is all these movements that are bubbling up at a local level. And the movements that are bubbling up at a local level around the living wage and community benefits agreements and linkages and stuff like that are creating a new language and a new possibility. It's going to bubble up to be something. And they were just like, you're just full of it, right? You're just way too optimistic. I don't think I was. And so I was kind of sitting there trying to figure out how do I get them to understand this. And it was December 2007, and I said, okay, who's the most exciting politician in the United States today? A lot of people, one person said Bernie Sanders from Vermont. Clearly the wrong answer. But just about everybody else said Barack Obama, right? And I said, well, why do you think he's the most exciting politician? We talked a little bit about it, and I said, some people think that he's got this ability to frame and talk to different people because he's half black and half white, and somehow that magically becomes alchemy and communication. But he was a community organizer in South Chicago. And he was a community organizer for the Gamaliel Foundation, which is a group that at that time was adopting the frame of regional equity with the notion that this would be a way for them to make links with suburbanites, be able to link up with rural areas, and I think it's certainly to his own credit, but it's also the fact that he went through that particular kind of training that he learned how to win in Illinois, and then he learned how to win in America, to talking to people who were not like him at the same time that he kept lifting up the important questions of race and never disappearing them. That is a new way to frame things. That is a new way to reach out to people. The only problem is it costs us meant that we keep having to update the end of the book. So fortunately, the last draft of the book, they let us, as we were looking at the final proofs, gave us some space to kind of update to cover the end of the election and stuff like that. I don't want to claim too much prescience, but what I would suggest is that if you did not hear what was coming, it was because you were not close enough to the ground. And if you were close enough to the ground, you knew something was coming, and that something is a really big reframing that has been happening at a regional level. It's happening here in Springfield with what you're putting together. It can be happening at a national level. It's going to require us thinking about the nation, but it's also going to require us learning from each other and our different regions. So with that, let me open up to questions.